Hey everybody, Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the extraordinary honor and pleasure of chatting with multi-instrumentalist, drum tech, bassist, and Fear of Water in its entirety, Dave Perry.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And that was quite the accurate and specific intro. So thank you.
You're very welcome. So Dave, as always, and there's an interesting thing that I'd like to mention, and it's just fascinating.
Sure.
We always go to the beginning, how you got started music and in bass, but in your particular case, you were born clinically deaf.
That is true.
And used music as part of this process. Tell us about this.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. You know, what's interesting is that like when you don't have a key sense or it's incredibly muted, you don't, as a child, you don't really know what the normal human experience is. Mm-hmm. And, you know, people have a kind of instinctual strength in them that allows them to adapt and strengthen their other senses, even if they're not aware of the fact that one of their primary senses is dulled. So I go through this extraordinary experience when I'm a kid, and I don't really know what's going on. But the way that it started was I was born with basically double concurrent and overlapping deep, very serious ear infections. And I had a weakened immune system at the time. Not that most toddlers have, or most infants have strong immune systems, but basically just running ravage on my ear canals and all of the functionality in there. And the doctors had a hard time figuring exactly what was going on, like figuring out what was wrong. During that time, it caused some pretty severe damage to my hearing. And that started me on this very difficult path of basically from birth until I wasn't speaking fluently until about 6. Yeah. So I would have, in the same way that I'm essentially legally blind, I wouldn't drive a car without my glasses. That's essentially where I was at with hearing, where everything sounded underwater or like Charlie Brown's parents. I was incapable of deciphering speech, certainly music. I mean, as a kid, there's all this great footage of me basically sitting by speakers or sitting under the piano because I was drawn to those frequencies. And something that what I thought talking was, it was from watching my mother, who's a genius musician and comes from generations of very talented musicians, and she would sing all the time. And that was my understanding of kind of verbal communication, as I understood, you know, something was coming out of this piano. Well, if you didn't know what a piano was, or I'm sitting by this box, which is a speaker, and frequencies coming out of there. And I could tell that she was responding to that. And even though I couldn't hear clearly, I understood that there was some synchronicity going on here. And that was the way that I started talking initially, is in this kind of sing-song way. So there's videos of me on my birthday when I'm like 3 and 4. My mom's like, you know, is that a good donut? And my response is, So I could like hear the rhythm and a little bit of the frequency, and I would just essentially sing it back. And so like quite literally, my introduction to human communication was musical without even understanding it. And so I go through a lot of these surgeries, go through some really hardcore medications that were approved at the time, but aren't anymore because they caused really crazy side effects. Like I was like deteriorating the material that's in between kids' spinal discs, and like making teeth fall out and making fingernail beds rot, essentially. So it ended up getting taken off the market, but it was effective for me. And, you know, fortunately I don't have any of those really hardcore side effects. But then I'm basically healthy at, you know, going into 5, and all of my peers are way ahead of me. So going into the earliest forms of school, I could, like, so many aspects of my brain were not functional. Couldn't remember the difference between right and left. Couldn't read an analog clock. Couldn't tie my shoes. My short-term memory was terrible. My vocabulary was non-existent. I could get words confused constantly, let alone, you know, being able to write or do arithmetic or learn the alphabet, anything like that. And this went on for years. I failed every single grade up until 6th grade. At my school, the principal basically gave parents the opportunity to decide whether or not they want to hold their kid back. And they made a decision to keep pushing me forward. And around like 4th grade, so I'm like probably 9, I really figured out that like the school is not for me. That for whatever reason, I'm not equipped with something that everyone else is. And what seems to be easy for everyone else is incredibly difficult. And I really kind of immersed myself in music at that time. I had no concept of like what a career in music. I just knew that music made me feel good, and that there was this enormous variety out there from long before I was born. And I understood that there's going to be more music in the future. And it's like, this is just so much more interesting to me than academics. And then the next logical step there was like, well, I would like to learn instruments so I can play the music that I like. And same thing with my cognitive abilities. I couldn't, in fourth grade, I took the test on the plastic recorder and just failed miserably. Couldn't read music. Hand-eye coordination was terrible. And yeah, it was super discouraging. But my default was kind of, I got a really old used Yamaha jazz kit, kick drum, snare drum, and hi-hat. And I just had it in the corner of my room. And, I couldn't form chords. I couldn't play piano. I just could hit stuff. But even at that, I was kind of like a marionette where I would lift my right arm and my right leg would go up, left arm up, left leg up. And all I could think about was just getting over this hump. To me, that didn't even mean learning drums. It was just like, I've overcome not being able to hear. And I need that next win because I feel like I'm just losing in everything across the board. And I very specifically remember on this road trip that my family took from Wisconsin to Florida when I was going into sixth grade, and I just bought Load by Metallica, and I was listening to the first track over and over and over again as this very straightforward, just, 1, 2, 3, 4 drum beat. And I was just playing air drums in the back of the car. And I was like, I'm going to just keep doing this. I keep failing over and over, but probably around like the 60th time of listening, I felt this enormous pop inside of my skull. The only thing I can compare it to is like your ears popping on an airplane times 1,000. I mean, it was so visceral that I like threw my headphones off. I actually thought one of my older brothers like punched me in the back of the head. That's how much of like a visceral sensation it was. And, for a second I thought like I should articulate what just happened. Like, so I might be in trouble or something that I'm thinking about. Like, I don't even know how to describe what I just experienced. So I decided I'm just going to sit there and be quiet. I'm not in pain. I calmed down, put the headphones back on, push play. And all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, like I'm the strings have been clipped. Like all of a sudden I had this ambidexterity that I'd been seeking for so long. And then I just went through the whole CD and it just made sense. And then for that entire trip, I just sat in my room and I had my thick, phone book size thing of CDs and just was listening to Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden and Offspring and just like, oh my God, like I can do this. And it was this incredible epiphany. It was this physical and spiritual moment for me. And that was all I was really thinking about. So we get back from this trip. I'm forced to go back to school. I'm like, what? I couldn't care less about school now. I have music in my life. But then I walk into school and all of a sudden I can read the clock and I can do arithmetic and my vocabulary has expanded. So quite literally, I've spoken to a neurologist about this actually several times since then. And what I experienced, this physical pop that kind of unlock, we see it in movies sometimes. You like take a pill and all of a sudden your brain is unlocked. That physically happened in my brain. And it's what stroke patients and severe head trauma victims go through a variety of different types of surgery or therapy or meditation or whatever. But it was basically this incredibly powerful synapse forming and connecting different parts of the brain that had been blocked off or maybe never unlocked, since I was a child. And that really actually creates this like jolt in your brain, and you can like physically feel that.
Wow.
Yeah. And just ever since then, both forming a relationship with music and then also understanding how connected that was to basically all of my cognitive functions or many of them. I just knew I'm not a fate guy, but this just seemed, it actually just seemed like science. It seemed like music is literally medicine. Music has healed me and given such a huge part of my life back. And because of that, I got my self-confidence back, and it drove this creative flame in me. And from that point forward, I was like, I have to absorb as much music as possible. And that started with learning as many instruments as possible. So I quickly started a relationship with guitar and bass from that point. So yeah, I mean, it was a really crazy way to start my life. I didn't really have perspective on how profound it was until later in life. I can't imagine living a life having my sense of hearing taken from me, because music just means everything to me. So I'm very grateful for that journey and the perspective it's given me.
Wow. And once you were able to start with your instruments and started learning, how did you pursue that? Did you go formal classes? Are you self-taught?
Yeah. So I am self-taught on everything. I tried lessons. I did about 2 years of piano lessons, and I hated the structure of it. Basically, in general, just in life, I kind of hate being told what to do, but especially when it's juxtaposed against the pursuit of creative expression. If it's a job or math class or something, I've come to expect to be told what to do. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But like, I'm investing myself in this instrument because of what my heart is saying to me, not because I'm curious about like, my posture and keeping a tennis ball in both hands so you have perfect palm and like learning my scales. The very rudimentary theory and just the understanding of chromaticism and I learned some very 101 basic stuff that helped me, that equipped me with some a baseline toolkit that allowed me to enter the world of other instruments without the assist of the internet. Not to got to date me there, but like I didn't have YouTube. I didn't even have a concept of like how to read tabs. I just really sat down with a guitar from that point after I quit piano and just didn't want to be told what to do. It's like, I'm going to form my own relationship here. And to this day, I'm 40 now, but like I have very little relationship with theory. I don't write. I mean, the songs that I create are in specific keys, but the construction and compositions of those are kind of indifferent to those keys, if that makes sense. It's not the cornerstone of the creation of my artistic expression. I experiment with a lot of different. I have so many guitars sitting around me right now, and I like to have every guitar in a different tuning with no real rhyme or reason, but the way that I see chords is shapes. It's not like, oh, this is what's on the E string and this is a B7 sustained minor. It really just is. I kind of have this catalog of hand shapes in mind that I apply to bass and piano and guitar and even drums. Like I playing drums with my eyes closed kind of reinforces this physical relationship that I have with the instrument. Yeah, it just started to make sense to me. It's been difficult to it's come with a lot of its own pros and cons. I think to become a true like shred master, it really does help to have a firm understanding of theory and the key that you're in and being in a specific tuning. But that's really just not my approach. And I think that has assisted me in creating a more distinct sound that is uniquely identifiable to me and what I'm doing with Fear of Water, especially in a genre that rewards, new bands sounding like the very popular, most recent band that's in the same genre as you. So I strive to be different in that sense. And I think not being firmly rooted in theory has assisted me in that.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Face Your Ears is a podcast for musicians of all levels working in their own home studios, eager to bring their creative ideas to life.
Join us as we explore the ins and outs of music creation in an approachable and engaging way.
Each episode features a blend of technical tips, practical advice, and insightful anecdotes, making it both informative and fun.
Listen to the Face Your Ears podcast on your favorite podcast platform today.
Nice. Well, and Fear of Water, as we mentioned, you are everything in Fear of Water. And it's one of these kind of great things we're seeing a little more and more, where because of the virtue of being able to lay down track after track, I mean, you can be your own drummer, you can lay down that, you can come in and lay down your bass line, you can do some vocals, and you have kind of total control. And it's something that more and more musicians have been embracing.
Sure.
A lot of times, what is the saying, jack of all trades, master of none. It requires a huge level of, competency. And I've definitely seen people that have tried it and you can kind of go, okay, yeah, he's a really good vocalist and he's really okay on guitar, but drums, he's just marking time. How did the whole idea of making you're here, you are the whole band. How did you come up with that?
I would say that, early on, I was incredibly inspired by guys like Phil Collins and then Trent Reznor and Dave Grohl, and understanding that these guys, and this is well before the ease of having what I have on this computer right now, especially with not just from a recording standpoint, but let's say I'm just completely incapable of even comprehending how a drum set works. I can open up GarageBand now and just use their, session drummer draw out, it's basically pre-made loops.
Yeah.
And even just changing it to humanize it or add fills, or like it's become so easy to make a full composition, even if you don't play multiple instruments or maybe even any instruments, certainly with the introduction of AI, but I was not afforded any of those things. So early on, they got multi-instrumentalists that were making entire compositions by themselves and kind of making that part of their brand as part of their career. I just found really appealing. Part of that was because I felt very isolated as a musician. Even as a kid, I was going to school with kids that loved like, Dave Matthews Band and stuff like that. And I'm like, any Pantera fans in the room? No, no one. Stabbing Westward? No. And I didn't even really find myself having like jam partners. So I was like, I just was so hungry for that music. It was kind of those things like, if you want something done right, do it yourself.
Yeah.
And I agree with what you were saying earlier, just about like, there's plenty of musicians out there who are like great vocalists who can play 4 chords on a guitar.
Yeah.
It was really important for me to kind of have a quality within my relationships with all the instruments that I play. So if I felt like I was neglecting bass, for example, I would stop playing guitar for a while and just like really work on my chops there, or even start writing, like start with the bass to write that way, which, ends up leading to whole new creative territory. And I'll do that, with drums as well, or piano, or, the voice, or even just taking the time to like up my game from a production standpoint and investing in new software and watching instructional videos or Nail the Mix or anything like that. Just in terms of like being a well-rounded musician and like member of this community, it's incredibly important for me to invest myself fully in like all of these different pursuits and not just be the singer who can play 5 chords. Yeah.
Nice. Well, and you have, in addition to doing all of these tracks, you've got a series of singles that I've been looking at, and you've been featuring someone to, and that changes a bit the nature of your music and what's going on. Tell us about your projects.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I didn't answer part of your question before, is in terms of like fear of water and like doing this by myself. So it's one thing to like the pursuit of learning all instruments, which is great and has been very fulfilling. But then I was like, I want to like actually create art and see where this goes. And so pretty early on created the Fear of Water moniker and started, putting out music in whatever iteration I could. And that's developed over a very long time. There's been brief iterations where there has been, like when I was in college, there was, I had a band of guys and like we did regional tours and stuff, but it's always just come down to me being the sole writer and recorder of the music. And coming out of quarantine, I really just had this like carpe diem, life's short. We don't know when the world is going to stop again or for how long. And from that point on, I've just been very, very serious about upping my game in terms of who I'm working with, kind of the logistics around the whole apparatus. And, I really started heavily pursuing, I create music all the time, but I really started kind of honing in terms of like a huge focus on quality over quantity. And since 2020, basically everything I've been putting out has been collaborations with a wide variety of artists that I really, really respect. This year alone, I put out a song called One Day with Heidi Shepard from Butcher Babies, which I'm incredibly proud of. Fans of Butcher Babies will be, I think, pretty blown away by the song because it really taps into a very tender side of a woman who's typically known for being this incredibly aggressive metal singer. I did a song with Elias Soriano of Nonpoint that reached number 10 on the Activator and SMR Top 50 charts in February. And then following that, a song with Aaron Nordstrom from Gemini Syndrome that hit number 7 on the same 2 charts. Yeah, I have upcoming singles with Jesse Leach of Killswitch Engage, Clint Lowry of Sevendust, Sahash Tickerton of Raw, and Dan Sugarman of Ice Nine Kills, as well as many others that are currently in the works. And it's been a really interesting, it opens up a lot of doors for me. It's incredibly difficult to do all that networking and lock down those relationships. But it's incredibly fruitful. Like once you get to that point of being able to create with these people that you really respect and admire. And since I'm not out there grinding it out on the road, like so many musicians do, and I totally appreciate that, just the path that I've chosen is that I create these really well produced and musically interesting songs, which I, write and perform all of the instruments and handle the recording. And at which point I am approaching these collaborators. And yeah, it's been going really, really well. And I recently just started working with the EMG management group, and it's really going to up the whole approach that I have with these kind of collaborations in terms of like upping the caliber of musician that I work with, and the kind of whole release schedule and strategy with radio support and playlists and the PR component of it. So I'm really excited about what the future holds with this approach. I'm still going to be doing singles where everything is a collaboration. I'm going to really try to broaden those horizons and work with some pretty both well-established, famous household name musicians, as well as some left field stuff that you might not see coming. But I'm pretty excited about it.
Nice. Well, and one of the videos I was watching, Codependent Parasites.
Yes.
It took me a second to realize that you're the same person on the drums as the person playing bass, as doing some of the vocals.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, what a coincidence. All these guys kind of look alike.
Look pretty similar.
And then I was like, oh, wait, oh, no, I get this. You know,
yeah, I mean, and I think something that's not clear without watching the video is that it's four of me in the same room. Like the director did this really amazing job of basically filming four separate performances and then meticulously editing them together. So I am quite literally standing next to myself on either side of me and a drummer behind me. And
exactly.
First time I saw that, it kind of broke my brain a little bit. I feel like we're not, it's weird. We all kind of hate hearing our own voices, and we look at ourselves in the mirror kind of weird, but imagine multiplying that by 4. So yeah, it was interesting, but I don't know, man, it's an important point of differentiation for me, is the approach that I'm taking and the fact that I am, doing everything. I think Wolfgang Van Halen has really leaned into this as well. Absolutely. I have an enormous amount of respect for him. And yeah, so the visual representation of what Fear of Water is and what I'm doing. It's important for my listeners to know that everything you're hearing is all me.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned Wolfgang, because early on, he and I had a chance to chat when he was releasing Monmouth.
Yeah.
And it was interesting the way it was received, because a lot of people were kind of like, well, no, he's just, he's being vetted because of who he is.
Yeah.
But I'm like, all you have to do is listen to the music, and he's got every lick and everything down. And we talked about going on tour, which again, he had to find people to do what it is that he could do, which is, again, he's been touring on that.
Yeah.
As you look ahead, would that be something that you would consider doing? Could you find somebody that can match your licks note for note?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something really cool, I'm glad that we're talking about Wolfgang specifically. So there is an Austin guy that's in his band right now, Jonathan Jordan, that from a band from Who It May, from Austin, that had this really interesting journey that I find incredibly inspiring coming out of quarantine, where essentially through relationships with engineers and producers, Clint Lowry from Seven Dust started doing another solo project and wanted to do a live stream performance during quarantine, which a lot of bands did. He was in a similar position where he wrote and recorded everything by himself, needed to build a band around it. He was suggested Jonathan as a guitar player. And I'm going to skip some steps, but basically that led to Clint and this producer talking to Wolfgang when he was in that position of like, I want to go out here and do this. And so basically you go from like, I'm just a local Austin musician, super talented guy, but kind of geographically restricted, especially during quarantine. And within 3 years, it went from, I'm going to do this one online show with Clint Lowry. And then 3 years later, he is touring with Metallica on the biggest metal tour on the planet, maybe ever. And it's so incredible to see that journey, and knowing that it wasn't achieved through that kind of like traditional conventional method of it's got to be you with the band in the van playing Tuesday night bar and grill, where it's just like you and the other band and the sound guy. Mm-hmm. Again, I have respect for that, but just given the nature of the music industry and life, I don't blame people for pursuing other methods. So like, I'm very attracted to that model. In fact, I'm even very attracted to doing what he did. So like Fear of Water for me is incredibly important and cathartic, and it is my voice and it's the way that I process emotions, but also like I just love the idea of creating. I like the opportunity to do it democratically or to help bring someone else's musical vision to life. So part of what I'm doing with Fear of Water is also like my sonic resume, and I'm very much so open to the idea of like achieving success and notoriety up to a certain point with Fear of Water, and then that opens the door for me to, be Wolfgang's drummer or bass player or whatever at a certain point. I just really, it's more about my relationship and love of music, and everything else is just icing on the cake. So, but anyways, to answer your question, yes, absolutely. I'm fully open to and excited about the idea of building an apparatus around me of like-minded, talented musicians. But right now, I think for the next year at least, I'm very focused on this, especially with this management in place and some big things that I have coming around the corner, is building up that momentum with these releases, these collaborations, these singles, get some more charting success, get on some really prominent playlists, and, kind of increase the notoriety and value of Fear of Water before, diving off the deep end, so to speak, with touring. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, and this would be a good time. Again, I know since you're managing all the instruments, but we always like to know a little bit of how you're getting your bass sound.
Sure.
What are you playing on gear-wise?
So what I got, one is a reverse camera. Over here, over my shoulder here, I got my Ibanez SR 500 ZW. It's a very reliable, versatile bass that I've just used in a wide variety of different scenarios, including, all Fear of Water stuff, as well as, doing some studio sessions. And I was in a 90s cover band, and I've really enjoy the P bass and the bongo as well. But this Ibanez has just been like the most versatile and comfortable for me. I also just love how it looks. I love how it sounds. I love how it feels. It's on the lighter end of as far as basses go, which is something that's kind of appealing to me with stringed instruments in general. Like, I'm a huge fan of Parker guitars, which are no longer in production, but they're famously thin and light and sound incredible. And, what's interesting is just especially where I'm at now, it's important for me to make incredibly good sounding demos. I think that really equips either my future collaborators or an engineer or producer that I'm working with, is like, this is as close as I can get to what I want to achieve, but now I'm handing this off to a true master to take it to the next level. And I've been working with this huge variety of different engineers and producers. I'll just do like 2 or 3 songs with like Kyle Odell, who did a lot of like Motionless in White, or Chris Mora, who did Upon a Burning Body. I'm working with Joseph McQueen right now, who did all of the Bad Wolves albums. I've just finished a really interesting project with DMX, who is dead, but I'm actually doing something with DMX and his team right now, with Eric Emery, who does all of like Blink-182's albums and Periphery and Starset. And so all of these different people have their own approach to creating, like that kind of sonic palette that they want to have their name attached to. And it's like meeting in the middle of like the sound that I'm not only comfortable with, but what it's really important to me, no matter who I'm working with, that someone listening to it can pretty much immediately tell that this is a Fear of Water song, even if it's coming from a completely different place in terms of who's running the board or who's making songwriting suggestions from a producer standpoint. A really critical element to me has been making sure that whatever you tell me as an engineer that how you want to track bass, what I'm going to tell you is that the percussive nature of the bass itself is critically important to me. Like I am a hard, heavy player. I'm pick all the time. It's the relationship between, in short, music is heavy because of the bass. Mm-hmm. Like, I love a huge guitar sound and wall of guitars, but I think anyone who's familiar in a studio environment knows that in a really good mix, if the bass is recorded well and you pull it out of the mix, the guitars should sound incredibly thin. Yeah. And it's about that kind of hand in glove relationship that you create sonically with all of your guitar flavors and then bass. I think one of the best examples of that is Dan Oliver from Nothing More. Of all of the really, really popular, successful bands out there, I think that is the most bass-driven band of the last 5 to 7 years. And most people don't even think that that's the bass. They think it's the guitar that is what you're hearing when you're perceiving it as like heavy chords in a chorus or something like that. Almost all of the guitar work is very like atmospheric, extra flavor, lead stuff, complementing the melody on top of that. But just when you really lock in the combination of the performance, the gear, the recording, and the mix, it's incredible the role that the bass plays in today's, modern hard rock and metal. So anyways, getting to the point, when I'm working with these different producers, we've done in the last 4 years, done everything from live tracking, going through a stack, going DI, doubling with, something like Umansky or Shin's bass, doubling with, sub-level synths to kind of double up the performance. It's so interesting to see like the different way that these kind of sonic chefs are putting together the meal. But at the end of the day, the number one thing that I want at the end of, in the mix is the actual impact and attack of what I'm playing. Obviously, the low end needs to be maintained and supported incredibly well, but I want the ring, the strike, the rattle of those strings to be reinforcing what's happening on the guitar and almost doing like a drum battle with the kit that I'm playing as well. So I don't really have a cookie cutter answer in terms of like what I'm using to achieve that sound. It's more about the partnership that I form with all of these different engineers and producers. And I just say like the critical aspect of my sound is the percussive nature of the bass itself. And then you tell me how you want to achieve that with gear and software.
Nice. Well, one small question that always has come to mind, especially with
Sure.
players that play hard, is there a particular brand of strings or anything that's been working better for you? Because if they're taking a beating, how are they holding up?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the Ernie Ball Slinkies, and there's just something in the same way with like playing drums that like a fresh pair of sticks is incredible. There's just something about fresh strings it's not really matched by anything else in life. Maybe like something fresh out the oven or whatever, or like eating an apple directly from a tree, or you catching a fish straight from the ocean and then like, filleting it and cooking it right on the boat. Like there's just something so incredibly important about those fresh strings. Obviously you get them stretched out so that you maintain the intonation, but like what you can achieve with those fresh strings, and specifically what I like is, with low gauge Ernie Balls, Slinkies, is incredible. So like shout outs to all the guitar techs out there who make all of those touring artists sound amazing every single night, because it just cannot be overstated enough, the value of fresh strings on guitars and bass.
Nice. Well, and as we look ahead, you've talked a little bit about some of the collaborations and the things you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Probably the best question would be for people to want to stay on top of what you're up to. Where's the best place for them to look?
So you can find Fear of Water on any place that you stream and download music. There's several albums worth of music going back to 2007. So if you really want to hear that like full evolution of me as a recording artist, definitely check that out. But, it's going to be all singles like it's been for the last 3 years and for the foreseeable future on those channels. And then in terms of like videos and behind the scenes content, me sharing other artist stuff that I like and touring journeys and everything like that, I'm really active on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and all of those is Fear of Water.
Nice. Well, Dave, we appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule and all of this wonderful stuff that you're doing. Folks, you've seen him here on Bass Musician Magazine, Dave Perry.
Thank you.